Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Weyandt, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Great Tech Group. You're invited to join our conversation to model the future of construction innovation and the digital transformation adventure of this great industry. My guest today is Christene Marie. She's the founder of Knowing and a fourth generation leader in her family's 100+ year trade business. She has guided organizations including Amazon, Hope Credit Union, and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation in building authentic brands that become enduring legacies. She's the host of Craft and Calling podcast and the Knowing podcast, an international speaker, actress, and author, and helps leaders achieve measurable results while unlocking the personal clarity required for lasting transformation. Welcome to the show, Christene.
Thank you. I am so happy to be here. I'm excited for the conversation we're about to have. It's so incredibly important. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining. So I'm exhausted reading through your bio and your list there. You got your hands in a lot of different areas. That's awesome.
I know. It's funny. I was actually chatting with someone earlier today, and one of the things that actually has been so hard for me is really just I like the analogy of a horse with blinders on. It's like I'm in a season where I'm putting my blinders on, and actually there's a couple of events happening towards the end of this month and next, and I'm just like not going to any of them. I'm going to hibernate, and I'm just going to put my head down and work, because I think I'm at that kind of building phase, where I think we all get to experience the glory of businesses thriving, but I'm kind of in this building mode, which is fun, but it also, there's discipline necessary in order to get to the next level. So I'm kind of in that discipline stage, I guess you could say.
Yeah, for sure. So I always like to start with how people got into construction, but you have this really cool legacy of 100 years plus of the family trade business. I'd love to kind of hear from your perspective. Like, what was that like growing up in the trade business, and how that influenced you in your career path now?
Yeah, well, it's amazing looking back and just sitting with the realization that my dad is a Superman, and I didn't know it until I got involved in the business. And that's actually been one of the things, looking back at childhood, and I'm actually going to be writing a book about a lot of this around the trades and what does it take to build such a strong legacy of a brand, and then also pass it down to the generations to come, because my great-grandfather started it in 1922. And what's interesting is that I don't believe he, nor my grandfather, nor my dad would have really thought of themselves as entrepreneurs. There's a big difference when it comes to the entrepreneur in general of, you actually might be an artist, and the entrepreneurial framework gives you freedom to operate in your artistry, or you might really be an inventor, but the entrepreneurial label gives you freedom. And so actually looking back at these three incredible men, I'm the fourth generation, and I've got 5 other brothers and sisters. So my mom was staying at home with us kids. Well, my dad was running the business, third generation, and it wasn't necessarily his dream when he was growing up to run his dad's business. He actually very much so was a true and is a true artist. He actually grew up being a professional square dance caller in Baltimore, Maryland. And It was a big thing. This was back in the 70s, 60s, where everyone were wearing those big hoop skirts with like the little poodle on them. People, man, they loved him. He was very famous, offered to fly to Hawaii and just go all around the country. And it was so interesting because there was this crossroads where he kind of had to make this decision of, will I choose family and the family business and having my own family, or continuing this kind of solo life, which was very late nights, working on the weekends. It's just not conducive to family. And so when I look at how we were raised, my dad made the decision to choose family. And he orchestrated his life to accommodate that priority and that value with my mom. Clearly having 6 kids says a lot. But then, when he came home, he was off the clock. He would take time. I have vivid memories of him laying down in the middle of our living room floor for 30 minutes with his hand over his eyes, and he would take a 30-minute power nap, and then he'd wake up and he would play with us all night. 6 children. I just cannot, I'm amazed at my parents. And he's got this business that he's growing and cultivating. And he really was a superhero. And none of us really saw that, because none of us really understood what it was to build a business that was so commonplace. But he really prioritized being off work and offline when he came home, taking that little power nap. And then throughout the day, another thing that really stood out was, no matter what time of day, no matter who it was, we always knew we could get in touch with him. And so there's something really beautiful about when you choose family as your cornerstone and as a core value of your life, then you drive your business to allow for that value to remain robust.
Hmm.
Versus if my value is entrepreneurship and that's who I am and that's what I want to be, then my family is going to fit in that. So really it comes down to this major question of what were his values, he along with my mom, and then they crafted their life accordingly. And throughout childhood, there were ebbs and seasons, flows throughout. You could kind of sense when those values, when he was kind of wrestling with himself of, does family really come first? And there were times where it didn't, but for the most part, it's like he kept choosing us and he kept choosing to maintain that. But even in working with him today, I got involved in 2017 on the branding and marketing side. So that's what I pursued for my career. And then I got involved to build out the family website and the business because they weren't online. They had operated for 90 years, never being online, and we're just all referral based. And I got involved, and it was just really beautiful because I had the opportunity to call customers, talk with them, really understand the heart of Hoffman Painting and Finishing and what he had cultivated and what he had built. And so much of it was actually built on him, built
Hmm.
on his personality and care for the customers. And so that family element, that value, not only did he orient his business accordingly, but he operated with the customers in a similar regard of extending that type of familial care. And so as all of us got involved to an extent or another, effectively forming a board for the business, that's really been the heartbeat that continues onward. Pulled through, yes, from my father and his father and his grandfather, but really my dad has really been the one to really solidify that because his dad didn't actually have a very close relationship with him. And working together in the business was almost like the only way that they could have that relationship. That's kind of what it was like growing up. My dad gave us just a beautiful, beautiful childhood and life because he really valued family first and foremost.
Yeah. I love that story. I have 4 kids myself, so I can relate a bit. 6 seems even like that's like the next
Four
tier.
is a lot.
I'm a junior next to that. So, the power
Right.
nap, that might
Yeah.
come in handy. I have to try that. But I really like the story of equating it to being intentional, having the family values and seeing that translate into the business and how he
Yeah.
interacted with clients. Because construction for sure is still a people first business.
Yes.
So how do we build connections that really matter
Mm.
when the world is becoming more online, it's becoming more digital? How do you maintain that personal connection?
Yeah. Yeah, I really at the end at first and foremost, right? So there's practices we could put into place, but they have to be embedded in the principle. And I think so much of us, we spend so much time focusing on the practice that it's like, well, but wait a second. What are your core values as a business? Do you actually value that type of interpersonal relationship? Because what is ultimately going to set you apart for all of us as home services, construction, B2B, B2C, even still, regardless of who it is how the customer feels when they interact with us. Whether it's
Mhm.
a business development manager working, with a B2C or B2B relationship, or it is us talking to the end customer. I think the biggest question is, what is our value as it pertains to the feeling we want the customer to have? Because that's what a strong brand does, is that it sets the emotional expectation for the experience that somebody's going to have working with us. And it's like, okay, so do we actually value on an emotional level the feeling that somebody's going to have and the transformation and the difference of working with us versus our competitor? And so what that might look like is efficiency. You're never going to hear from me. It's all automated. You're going to get all these emails. And there's actually companies that really value that. And there are some customers that really look for that. However, what I have found time and time again, Todd, is that more often than not, especially when it's coming to a job or a project where you're working with the owner, whether it's a homeowner or the owner of the project itself, they're bought in. They're really, really passionate about this job and they are very emotionally attached, even though they don't want to admit that. Harvard found that 95% of our purchase decisions take place in our subconscious, which is where our emotions live. So we have to identify first and foremost, do I even hold a value around the feeling that I want my customer to have when they work with us? Is that feeling trust? Is it that they feel like we really understand them? Because whatever that feeling is, okay, then what's the practice that we're going to put in place to ensure that that is executed upon? And so some of the practices that we've implemented is I kind of like working through the customer journey of the very first interaction they have with us. That might be an ad, that might be a video ad, it could be an email. It could be just on our Google search results when they come to find us. And nowadays, it could even be in a ChatGPT type of result, answer
Uh-huh.
engine. So there's so many different modalities of how people will find us. So then the question is, okay, what's the experience that they're having across all of these modalities? Because we can't guarantee that they're only ever going to be coming in through this one channel. So I kind of break down, okay, here's all the different steps of the customer journey. Is that feeling reinforced? And then is the touch point in place, like the actual physical? So we've got to have the messaging, but then also the action in place to back it up so that they really can have that experience. So really it's the first off, it's the question, do I even hold this as a value? Second, what's actually the customer journey? Is there consistency? Is the messaging and action working in tandem together? And then in terms of practical application, having the immediate text message sent out when they fill out a form, that's so important. Following up with them so quickly, having that automated, yes, but having the language really stand out. And y'all, I love including pictures. For example, if somebody's going to be coming out to my home for a service appointment, who's coming to my house? I've seen this before and I absolutely love this. I've gotten a text from my HVAC company and said, Todd is coming out to you. He's a war veteran. He's got 4 kids. He loves to be asked about his favorite cheese. You know what I mean? It's just so
Yeah.
random. And I've actually gotten this before. And I felt so excited to meet Todd, you know? It was
Right.
just a really fun experience. And then I get a text from another company and it's just like, we'll be there by 5. And I can't get in touch with anybody. And it's so stale. So it's the messaging and action working in concert with each other to reinforce the feeling that we have that's predicated on the value for our customer.
Yeah. I love the question of asking yourself, does the practice meet the principle? I think it's a
Mm,
good gut check because when it doesn't and it's not lined up, that's when the brand comes off as inauthentic because there's a
yes.
misalignment there that you're like, this is just totally forced. So
Yeah.
it's a good gut check for brands. You mentioned that there's a lot of different ways that people can come in, and you can't really kind of control the entry point and the messaging point. I think in the world of social media, it's opened it up even more so that it's not
Yes.
just the company brand that you have to look out for, but people can come in on individual profiles as well too, that everybody now is
Yes.
the brand of the company and an ambassador of the company, whether they want to be
So
or not.
true.
How do you coach and advise people to kind of not fight against that, but own that and make it not
Yes.
super intimidating?
Yeah, really, really embrace it and alchemize it, right? Because if the brand is smart, they'll view it as a brilliant and exciting avenue to champion who they are. And we think about a lot of popular brands. Gecko has the little gecko presentation of it. It's the icon. It brings a semblance of personality to the brand. And we see this a lot on TV advertisements where there is an actual champion. There's like what's it called? There is like that what's it called? Help
Like
me out
the
here.
brand ambassador kind of deal,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So a
spokesman.
lot of these bigger brands, yes, they have that spokesman, that spokes thing, whether it's a Geico or a person
Yeah.
flow, where man, there's a face, there's a personality, there's a warmth to the brand. But with companies like, I'll use Amazon as an example because we've worked with them in the past on this very specific subject. Amazon is so big. They have so many different departments. Amazon Web Services is very different than the e-commerce side. And so what we actually did with them in the past was really equipping their executives for a particular event to be the champions of the event itself rather than posting. Yes, you can post from the company page, but leveraging the individual, the personal, so that they are effectively knowing who they are, yes, but also working in concert with the brand. When we did a whole campaign for them, we found that actually these individual leaders, while they only had between 5 to 10,000 followers and Amazon Web Services had 7.5 million at the time on LinkedIn, man, the posts that went out on the company page that is lacking, like, well, who are you, performed minusculely compared to every single one of these executives who are posting with pictures, with their own personal spin on it. And so we actually took the time to really get to know the executives so that it could be yes, in alignment with the values of Amazon, but really in their own personal voice. And man, people ate it up. The hashtag ended up going trending on LinkedIn. And it was just wild to see, man, people really want to hear from people. They want to do business with people. It's so important. So I'm so grateful that you brought that up, Todd, because there's a whole treasure trove of your team, whether it's your BDMs, your salesmen, and even operations, who can be boots on the ground saying, hey, look, here's a before and after picture. We love what we do. Super simple. It doesn't need to be fancy.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, what's that role of storytelling? Well, how's that play
Mm,
into making your digital presence really feel authentic and, and avoiding that kind of self promotional blah
yes.
that we see all the time, especially, it's creeping into LinkedIn even, which used to
Yeah.
kind of be separated from that. But how did you
Yeah.
incorporate that storytelling?
Yes, I love that question. So when it comes to a really good story, there's always that arc. There's
Hmm.
always the problem. There's always the what are we going to do? Kind of building that. And y'all, stories, really good stories do pull on the emotional connection. So there is something about being that requires bravery to step out and be brave enough to tell a story. And it doesn't need to be, Todd, to your point, anything like soppy or man, my kid the other day, it doesn't have to be anything like that. But what it is that it's allowing for the peak of, oh, I wonder what's going to happen, the curiosity, the lean in to
Hmm.
then say, oh, and this is how we solve the problem. And so it is kind of like this emotional arc that we take people on. And it's allowing for, honestly, this is where AI comes in because you're talking about, this digital world. How do we allow for the alchemy of the personal brand, which is our greatest asset? That's so important for us to realize because so many of us in construction, we can move from job to job. Or let's say I've worked with a number of different and actually talked to a number of different owners who had their construction business. And then they went on to start a software company because they found, hey, man, I've really struggled with this in my trades business. Let me go create the solution for it and then go back and help everybody else that was in my field. So, us actually putting into and investing in our personal brand really is helpful for us across the board, whether we ever do want to deviate or just grow what we're already doing right now. So that was a little side note, but coming back to this concept of storytelling, allowing for leading with the problem, leading with kind of what the issue is, or you can lead with, actually a friend of mine said this the other day in a mastermind I was in. I loved it. He was talking about the magician's trick. And he was talking about the magician's like, I'm going to do something so amazing. And you're like, there's no way. And so leading with kind of like this really like, there's no way you can do that. That's so interesting. How are you going to do that? So you
Hmm.
can lead with the problem that everyone emotionally feels where you're like, I hate when my door sticks and it does not open. And then what am I going to like? I hate that problem. So you can talk to the pain of the homeowner, or you can talk to, did you know that there is a way that you get to completely reinvent the entire process of building your porch? And you're just like, what? Like, what direction are you going with this? So there's multiple different kind of hooks and elements to start the story. But the reason why that first matters is because there is so much content on social media that you need to have something that stops their attention. One and stops their scroll and grabs their attention. I like using this little tool. It's kind of like a fancy text editor and it's free. I just put the little hook in to that tool and it makes the text look different. It makes it bold because if I do it in a Word doc and I choose bold, it changes it on LinkedIn and reverts to normal font. But this
Hmm.
little fancy font generator allows for then the hook to actually stand out. And that helps with the scroll stopping as well. So y'all really leaning in. And I actually did a whole little workshop with some BDMs, the business development managers, a couple weeks ago in construction. And we were talking about how do we allow for the story to touch on different parts of our business, yes, but also our lives. Like, do we feel comfortable talking about a lesson in business that I'm now using that was taught to me by my dad or that was taught to me by my daughter? Because that does hold a lot more emotional resonance for people where they will lean in because of the emotional capture. Again, 95% of our purchase decisions take place in our subconscious. So we need to have that emotional lure and the lean in for people. So it really is taking time to assess what am I comfortable sharing about? What are the values on the personal level and the company level to ensure that there's a good marriage that can be talked about effectively? What's happening in the personal life? Is there a personal picture? I've tested this across many, many platforms. Personal pictures almost always outperform the picture of the rig. You know, if I'm standing in front of the rig versus the rig itself, I'm going to do better than the rig because it's people want to see people.
So a lot of things were popping in my mind as you were just talking there. The relatability, I think, is the key kind of ingredient there when you're telling the personal story. That it's not necessarily trying to do like emotional manipulation or anything. It's just being relatable and
Yes.
telling that story, and that's people are gonna relate to that, buy into the hook, and then they're gonna see the problem in their mind easier than if you just state the
Yes.
problem in very black and white and hit them over the head with it. Having that
Yeah.
story makes it more relatable. The other thing you started with, you got to be brave. So I
Mm.
love that. There's an inherent kind of awkwardness though when you start putting yourself out there on social media, and I can hear a lot of the audience in their head being like, "All right, that's great for a marketer, but I'm not a marketer. I don't know. I'm not comfortable with the camera facing me. I'm not a storyteller. How is this going in for me?" They're super nervous about the content creation.
Mm.
What's a good first step for them to step into this world, embrace the awkwardness
Yeah.
and uncomfortability, and kind of share their story online?
Y'all, you're not gonna you might not like this. So I hope it's okay for me to say this, Todd. I
We talk hard
really
truth, so let's do it.
Okay, good. I am such an advocate. You mentioned emotional manipulation earlier, and I'm so grateful you brought that up because that is the antithesis of what we're trying to do here. We
Mhm.
have to lead with authenticity, and that actually requires more bravery than if I was to just have ChatGPT write it for me. If it's actually coming from me, that's scary. So what I like to encourage people to do is if you're not posting regularly, to take a picture, whether it's you at a job site, whether it's you sitting at your computer, whether it's you sitting in your van, and you're like, I've been challenged. I was listening to Todd's Bridging the Gap podcast, and I got a challenge to post once a week on social media. And I feel so uncomfortable, but here I am and I'm doing it. This is post number 1 out of 8 weeks. You know what
Mm.
I like? Be so honest. And that is what people rally around you. They really, really do. And there's something, I really get passionate when I read Theodore Roosevelt's Citizens in the Republic. And it's a speech from 1910. I believe it was 1910 in Paris. And there's this section called The Man in the Arena. And it talks about, it's not the critic who counts. It's not the person standing outside of the arena pointing, who frankly has so much confidence and there's a smugness about them that everybody thinks that they've done the work. They haven't. They're literally sitting there being the critic, and we're the ones in the arena. Our face is dusty and marred, but we know the wins and the failures, but at least we know the lived experience. And there's something so passionate in that for all of us because we're doing the work. And there's something really, really brave about allowing ourselves to honor the work that we're doing,
Mhm.
to honor the lives that we're living today. And there is something, man, that's so, oh, gosh, it's like I wish my dad had actually told me more about what he did. I wish I could have really respected and honored my dad the way I do now 15, 20 years ago. But it was so distant. It was so removed the life he lived from 9 to 5 that I couldn't learn from it. I couldn't respect it. I couldn't champion it. Neither of my brothers wanted to go into the field. And I think that there was an element where it was so removed that it was never even an option. And
Mm.
so y'all, how you're showing up. Somebody I was talking to the other day, he was like, my daughter was researching me the other day and she quoted back to me some of the stuff I was saying in terms of a lesson, like a life lesson. Our kids are watching. And so there's so many reasons. Yes, it helps build the business. Yes, it helps honor the life you're living, but it also is leaving behind a legacy in real time that your kids get to learn from and watch. And there's probably a lot of people that you're helping along the way. So doing a fundamental shift of, okay, I'm just going to be super authentic. I'm going to tell the truth. If we just lead with, I'm going to tell the truth, that's really, really helpful. And then number 2 is I'm here to serve. It's like that authentic but also empathic approach where I'm doing this for everybody else, but I need to be rooted and grounded in who I am and telling the truth. What are your thoughts on that, Todd? What would you add to that?
There's a lot of really good stuff there. So I love the aspect of bringing the audience into your journey and just kind of
Mm.
owning it. Of, hey, this is my first post. This is really awkward because as soon as you do that, you take the elephant out of the room.
Yes.
You like, kind of like bring them
Go
in on
for it.
the joke, and so they're
Yeah.
like, hey, go for it. Like, Christene, you're doing this. And they're going to be more encouraging, where if you probably didn't do that and you're just like staring at it like a hostage video or something, they're going to be like, I'm not watching that again. But they're going to be rooting for you, like you said, if you bring
Yeah.
them into it. So just own it. Nobody's perfect. I think being able to own what your lack of knowledge or something is super important, because in
Mm,
construction, you're going to get found out really easy. Like I've teased for years, you do not want to live in a house that I'm going to build just all by myself. I need other
yes.
people to do it with me and for me. I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
innovation. I love the kind of the business practices of it, but there's no way I can go out and build a skyscraper by myself and it would fall down in 5 seconds. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to claim that I can do that, because I can't. It's a cool skill for people. It's not one of mine. I have other assets here in the construction industry that I
That's
can
so
bring.
good.
So you just own it, and
Yeah.
then it brings in, I guess, that authenticity again,
Yeah.
because you're like, yeah, my skill set's over here, not there. I want to learn from you, and um, like,
Yes.
what are you doing with that? So bringing them in
Yeah.
is super important.
I love that. I really, really love the also kind of almost like the holding hands and moving forward, whether that's bringing in the audience or even, like a really, really easy post is, I was on the job site with this landscaping company, or I was on the job site with, we're doing the handoff. One of our clients is ground improvement. So they come in for the skyscrapers, they come
Hmm.
in and settle the ground. Well, who's a company that's coming in after you? How can you pump them up on your social? I mean, like taking a picture and being like, handing it over to John Smith here. Way to go, John. You're like handing it off to the next best crew that we can think of after we do our ground improvement process,
Yeah.
So really thinking of we're all in this together and it's not so much about me really does make it less scary. And in terms of like what do I talk about? There were a number of when we really sit and kind of think about those different parts of our lives. There's the boots on the ground, being there's the lead in process of what are some things that our customers can actually help prepare for us to come in and do the job? What are some myths in the industry that people just don't realize? What are some real life lessons that I use to be able to keep my professional life healthy and like, scaling and growth oriented and keep my marriage from not falling apart? You know, there's some real there's some real life issues that we don't talk about, Todd, and
Hmm.
more people are really wanting to talk about how do I keep my family intact and my business? How do I do everything? And it's possible. It really, really is possible if we're living our life embedded in our values. So
Hmm.
even this whole thing of like, man, guys, I had to choose between going to my daughter's soccer game tonight or staying on site. Tonight, I chose staying on site, and this is why. And I'm really excited to catch her game next week. That's
Hmm.
that's a story. You're going through your own conflict and you're going through your own challenge that everyone else is going through, that everyone can resonate with. And the last thing I'll say to that, unless you have more to add, the vanity metrics are really dangerous. The likes, the comments, the shares. If we're chasing that rather than really doing this because we're doing it for ourselves, I've given myself challenges that really helps me focus on. I'm really grateful I did it, and I actually award and congratulate myself and get my own self-administered dopamine hit rather than looking externally for other people to give me that dopamine hit. I
Hmm.
get to do it myself, and then I'm not looking for the external validation and approval because I will always be let down. So if
Hmm.
you're doing it because you really think that this is the next step to the growth of your business, even to yourself, then that alone allows for you to kind of self-administer the pat on the back.
Yeah. Yeah. A quick note on the vanity metrics. I agree that that becomes a very slippery slope, because
Yeah.
if you start chasing the vanity metric, you're gonna lean into what's getting you the most likes, and that may not be where
Mm,
you're really authentic in, and so you become
that's
kind of this
good.
caricature of yourself. So avoid doing that. But I want
That's
to pick
so
up on
good.
a line that you were talking about with your dad and sharing his story, that you wish you had learned that more even 15 years ago and stuff. And I think that that's the beauty and the potential that we have here with
Mm,
the world of social media, is there's a huge labor shortage in the industry. Not a well kept secret there, that we have to bring in other people, the next generation, into construction.
mm,
And there is such a huge misunderstanding that they have of what construction is, and what happens on the job site. And in very large part, I think it's because there's an enormous marketing problem in construction,
mm.
that we don't share what's happening. We don't show what's going on a job site. And so we've left it to culture and, tropes from
Mm,
60 years ago to kind of define the industry instead of stepping up and saying, hey, here's what's actually going on and sharing those stories of the struggles that everybody's going through and how do you deal with the tension of your career versus family versus whatever the dynamics are at play. I think being able to give voice to
yeah.
that on social can really help draw in the next generation. What are your thoughts there?
I love that. I love that framing because you're absolutely right. And it can also be you can show the fun parts too. It
Sure,
doesn't
sure.
just have to be the negative. Like I remember I was looking up one construction company and there was this, it was on Instagram, which normally I don't see a lot from construction companies on Instagram. But man, he was like dancing on the job site and it was just such a cute little video and it got so much engagement. And y'all on TikTok, to your point, Todd, y'all, if you want to grow your business, being on social media is a really, really clever way. And I'm saying grow your business not just in terms of attracting new clients and customers, but also to your point, talent. And allowing for your people to have fun on social, that's another way that can really make them feel really seen and have a good time. So if they're
Mhm.
allowed to take videos and then send it to you or post it themselves, there is kind of you get a kick out of it. It's fun putting together some of these videos and you also it's kind of employee morale. Like, look what we just did. We just created that. There's
Right.
so much focus in the future of, oh, we're on to the next job, on to the next job. And that speaks to us in general in life. We're always on to the next thing. We're always living 5 seconds ahead, 10 seconds ahead, 10 weeks ahead. And so the capture on social helps kind of solidify, man, look what we just built. Look what we just did. So there is an employee morale and also kind of a showing off a little bit of like, look at how good we are, guys. Cheers and kudos to you all. Thank you for the hard work.
Yeah, I totally agree. My team hears me say this a lot that we should take the work seriously, but not ourselves seriously. And I
Mm,
think having those moments to just laugh with each other and be
yeah,
goofy and be silly, whether that gets posted on social or not, I think that
right.
having those lighthearted moments is like absolutely critical. You can't
I
do
love
this
that.
work. You'll get burned out if you don't take
Yeah.
those times to just laugh with each other.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. This next generation, I think, is actually really interested in what each one of us has to offer in this regard because I think that
For
they
sure.
all kind of see the writing on the wall a little bit of how jobs are going to change so much. And I think construction is going to have probably the longest lifeline of consistency with what it looks like for the day to day, even though there are some new tools and robots being added into it. But for the most part, I think that there's almost more reliability in the trades than ever before with other
Yeah.
industries.
Yeah, for sure. So as we start to kind of wrap up the conversation, a couple rapid fire questions for you.
Yeah.
First is what is the phrase modeling the future? What does that kind of mean and look like to you?
I think it really, really comes from a deep well from within. So, how well have I cultivated my own vision, my own belief systems to then ensure that my behaviors align with it? We talked a little bit about practice and principle. So, in order for us to have that modeling for the future, I think that it really starts with who you and I are, and then the man, it's like the robustness, the power, the potency thereafter of walking that out and living it out really starts with who we are at our core.
Yeah, I like it. What does innovation mean to you?
I think that comes back to bravery as well, Todd. It's really being brave enough to step into and iterate upon. It's taking what's already working and making it better, but then also giving ourselves space and time to dream and step into the unknown to be creative. But that requires a risk and a willingness to both fail and be bad at something. So
Hmm.
innovation requires at its core bravery.
More than agree with that whole statement. So how do people find out more information and connect with you?
Visit me at craftandcalling.com.
Nice. I like it. So, final
Yeah.
question for you. If I could give you all construction power, you could snap your fingers and innovate one thing in the industry. What would you pick to innovate?
Man, I would innovate the way people are capturing their data because I don't think that they're being data driven in a lot of their decision making, especially for the
Mm,
smaller businesses. I think that I'd really, really change the fundamental approach to processes and systems operations because without the clarity of that, we're not going to be able to forecast and then scale and meet our own potential. And I feel passionate about that because that was one of the biggest things that we did for my dad and Hoffman Painting and Finishing was really being able to come in and put those processes and systems in place. So it wasn't tied to him. We were able to we doubled the business within 2 years, and really that was what fundamentally changed everything, was him being able to put these systems in place, and then we can forecast and plan out according to the data, but then also incorporating the emotional intelligence aspect to ensure that our messaging really resonates because people do business with people.
Yeah. I mean, the data aspect of it, that's a whole podcast series
Yeah.
in and of itself. I agree. It's a big, complex issue
Yeah.
that needs to be tackled for sure. So
Yeah.
good point. Christene, thanks so much for taking the time. There was plenty more that we could go down, but thanks for taking the time and
Mm.
doing a little flyby on this.
Yeah, Todd, thank you. This was so much fun. I really enjoyed it.
And now it's time for my Todd takes from this episode. First take, align practice with principle. At the end of the day, it's not just about what you do, but why you do it. If your practices don't line up with your core principles, your brand will come across as forced and inauthentic. Make sure every digital touchpoint reinforces the values you want people to experience when they interact with you or your company. Second take, everyone is a brand ambassador. In today's world, every person on your team is part of your company's digital presence, whether you like it or not. Rather than resist it, lean into it. Be intentional about the value you're adding and embrace the fact that your people are the best storytellers for your brand. Authenticity and relatability from real humans always outperforms polished corporate messaging. And finally, be brave enough to tell your story. Sharing online feels uncomfortable at first, but bravery and consistency builds the muscle. Bring your audience along on your journey. Own the awkwardness and keep showing up honestly. Relatability, not emotional manipulation, is what resonates. The more you share authentically, the more momentum you build for yourself, your team, and the next generation who needs to see what construction really looks like today. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you are interested in learning more, you can visit our sponsor, Great Tech Group, at asti.com for more information. You can listen to this podcast anytime by simply going to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, be sure to check out our website, bridgingthegappod.com. As always, I'm Todd Weyandt, thanking you for joining the conversation to model the future on the Bridging the Gap podcast. Keep innovating.